friends, we're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. There behind the glass, there's a real blade of grass. Be careful as you pass. Move along, move along. Come inside, the show's about to start. Guaranteed to bring your head along.
Good Tuesday morning to you all. It is 10 o'clock Central Time. Glad you're with us wherever you are. Because, as the song says, welcome back, my friend, to the show that never ends. Though there are probably some that wish it had. Anyway, last Tuesday, as a matter of fact, we were in South Lake for the Kids Matters International round-the-block clothing trip to Kohl's department store, and Mike Kiselak and his entire crew, which were a part of it. We appreciate everything that they did for us. Not really in a last-minute type situation, but it was not exactly. It wasn't exactly planned. I called Mike up and I said, "Hey, do you want us to do it?" And he says, "Yeah, here, call this guy." So I called this guy and he said, "Yeah, we'd love to have you out there." And then when I get there, the store manager says, "Can we put you here?" Which, by the way, was in a section of the store where there was ladies' clothing. Draw your own conclusions. You can go wherever that wants to go. But in any case, great thanks to the people of Kohl's. We want to thank them for allowing us to kind of take over that little section for 2 hours. We want to thank Kids Matters International, the organization that is, it's a great, you really don't know what you're missing. If you haven't really, maybe you have. If you've done some charity work and you volunteered and you went to, say, I don't know, Salvation Army, Goodwill, whatever, and you see the faces of not only children but adults that have an opportunity to kind of get a fresh start, if you will. Well, this organization, it's strictly for the kids, not for the adults. But they take families. Some of these families come from a hardened life ship, if you will. They might be in a shelter. A homeless shelter, a battered woman's shelter with their families. They might come from less than better income, if you will. But they're not having to have a hand-me-down, and they're not having to get they don't have to go through Goodwill or a Salvation Army or their older sister or brother or cousins or whatever the case may be. They're getting something fresh. They're getting something new. And Mike, who got involved with this organization, I think he said 16 or 17 years ago, invited me to be a part of it back in 2007, and we're just thrilled to death to be able to be a part of it. To see the faces of those kids, that was worth the price of admission. So we want to thank those folks. But we're back on schedule today at 10 o'clock and doing our thing. And if you're reading on on our website or the placard that we put up, which we tell you what we're going to be doing today and the topics and what have you, we're going to be all over the place because this month, this year, is quite significant. In 1863, on this very date, November 19th, 1863, in a Pennsylvania town known as Gettysburg. And the only reason why that town is famous, and the only reason why people know that it exists, is because of a man who at the time was president, stepped foot on a cemetery, dedicating it to the fallen soldiers of both the Union and the Confederacy. And it's called, obviously, the Gettysburg Address, and was given by, at that time, President Lincoln. They're commemorating that today, 150 years later, though some think that, and this goes back to, okay, we read about it in history books, but we haven't really lived it, talked about it, tasted it, touched it, whatever. And I kind of equate and I'll say this now, and I'll probably get in trouble for it later, but in a few days from now, in just a few days from now, and we're going to talk about this more at length in just a bit, the city of Dallas, and for that matter the country, will commemorate in some capacity or way the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Now, we don't have, back in those days, back in the 1800s, we didn't have instant information as we have today. We have the internet, we have television, we have radio, we have all sorts of we have a way of getting the information in our hands a lot quicker, and I'll explain that about the Kennedy assassination in just a bit. I know this is a sports show that we're talking a lot of history, but you know what? It matters. It truly does, because, and we'll parlay this into that particular weekend, that Sunday in 1963, where Pete Rozelle, up into his death, once said that was probably the biggest mistake of my life, allowing the NFL to play on that Sunday, including the game in Cleveland, Ohio, between the Dallas Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns. We'll talk about that in a minute, though. That's not relevant to this portion of the show. But 150 years ago, Abraham Lincoln stands at the hallowed grounds of Gettysburg, and he does his 2-minute speech. It's not even 2 minutes, like $1:46 or something like that. It's short. It's 200 and something words. The speaker before him, the former Secretary of State for the United States, read a speech that went on 2 hours. And then here's President Lincoln, who stands up, does a 240-something word essay that every word punctuated, every word has meaning, every word has some resonance to it. And for that, we always said there are only a couple of presidents that had the command of the English language. Abraham Lincoln was one. And John Fitzgerald Kennedy was another. Then there was Ronald Reagan. Good actor. Of course he was good with words. But point is, there have only been a handful of presidents that had the command of the English language. And as I just said, Abraham Lincoln was one. We're going to play that speech as it was reenacted by a voice actor. And again, it's very poignant, very, very, it's got a lot of punch to it. But they're commemorating today in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the 150th anniversary of that speech, that dedication of that cemetery. And I want you to think about this for a second, because they talk about there in that cemetery alone, there are 50,000 graves, both Union and Confederacy, in that one area in Gettysburg. And if you've ever seen the movie Remember the Titans, Denzel Washington's the head coach of a school that got integrated in the 70s. And there was a lot of problems, and to his credit, and this is a real live honest story, but to his credit, he brought his team together, made them discover each other. Black, white, it didn't matter the color of their skin. He wanted to be unified under one banner, and that was the school banner, the school colors, all the rah-rah you want to go with it, but it made a point because back in the 70s that was unheard of. He took his boys to training camp. Now, they don't do this in high school anymore. They just have, you go to the high school, you work out, and that's it. He drove them to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And he made them run in the middle of the night. This is a scene in the movie. And he takes them to Gettysburg, and he takes them to the cemetery. And as a individual, and remember, the head coach now is a black coach. He's African American. He's dealing with a coaching system that is integrated. His team is now integrated, and he's having to explain to them that on this battlefield, 50,000 lives were lost on that battlefield. And what were they fighting for? Their beliefs, their rights within their minds, and when I think about the loss of life at that battlefield, and then I'm reminded that in Washington, D.C., along the mall, this is where all the memorials are, the Jefferson Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial. And there's also another one, the Vietnam Memorial. And at that memorial, there's 58,000 names on that wall. And you think about that for a minute. 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg, 50,000 lives were lost. And in the years that we were fighting in Vietnam, from 1962, if you will, 63, all the way to 1972, when 73, when they all came out, and then, of course, the fall of Saigon in 75, 58,000 lives. Of course, I'm sitting here thinking that one life lost is one too many for freedom. But nonetheless, that's the reason why men and women wear uniforms, and that's the reason why they volunteer at this point. They're not drafted. They're not asked to join that service, only as a request, but not as an order to don on those uniforms. And because this is November, and because Veterans Day was last week, and because we have that military, and they remind us every day that they're the ones keeping that torch of liberty lit and keeping it free. And remember, the price of freedom is not free. It comes with a price. Ask 50,000 lives at Gettysburg and 58,000 names on a wall, and the hundreds of thousands of lives, millions of lives that were lost in World War II. You know, when you think about it, not just soldiers died in that, but a lot of civilians. We're talking, yes, the 6 million Jews and Gypsies and others that died in the concentration camps, but also in Japan when 2 bombs were dropped, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we know, yes, the means came to an end. I mean, there was a purpose, and it did so. But 150 years ago, in a small town in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, one man stood among many, and he gave a speech that resonates today.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
We'll be back right after this along the North Texas Sports Network.
With traffic accidents being the leading cause of teen deaths, it's critical to give your teenage driver as much protection as possible. Locate One Plus uses GPS technology to help parents monitor their teen drivers.
Hello?
Hi, Sharon. Sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for Tiffany. I tried her cell phone and I keep getting her voicemail. Is she with you?
She was, but the girls borrowed the car. Let's see. They just left the movie theater and they're headed home. Should be there in about 5 minutes.
How do you know that?
Oh, it's the Locate One Plus GPS system. I can log in anywhere, my phone, my computer, and I can see where my car is real time, where it's been, how fast it's going. It's amazing. If it's speeding, I will instantly get a text message to my phone.
Locate One Plus. Writing that down right now. Thanks, Sharon.
Hi, this is Dave Michaels. LocateOnePlus.com is the website to help you protect the ones we love most, our children. LocateOnePlus.com, helping parents keep their children safe. LocateOnePlus.com. Lone Star. Those two words mean so much to Texans. It's a way of life. It's pride. It means quality. Lone Star State Cigars, they understand all that those words mean. Can buy one of their 4 locations, 2 in Allen, 1 in Plano, and 1 up in Richardson. See what pride and quality and way of life means. Lone Star State Cigars. You can find them on the web as well at LoneStarStateCigars.com. Way of life, the pride and the quality, all under one banner. The Lone Star. Lone Star State Cigars. Once you come in, you'll understand, partner.
Autumn. The sound of that word conjures up images of leaves changing colors, crisp chill of the evenings, pumpkins, and pigskin. Yep, it's football season once again. And what better way to tailgate than with cooking items from the Pampered Chef? The ease in which you can order and the quality of the products are almost too good to be true. And since it is that time of season when high schools and boosters are looking for ways to raise money, check out Pampered Chef's charity and fundraising. It's much more than just selling wrapping paper or popcorn. Pampered Chef delivers quality products that are used day in and day out for your home. Call Shelley Wiley at 214-808-7402 for more information, or email her at shelleycancook@yahoo.com. Let's bring out the chef in you, the Pampered Chef.
Hi, this is Gilbert, and you're listening to my friend Dave Michaels on the Dave Michaels Sports Show on the North Texas Sports Network.
And we are right back here on the Dave Michaels Sports Show for Tuesday, November 19th, 2013. The 150th anniversary, as we mentioned earlier, is the Gettysburg Address and the dedication of the Gettysburg Cemetery, if you will. And moving along, we're going to talk a little bit about, last week the Cowboys actually had the week off. They had the bye week, so they didn't play. They didn't lose. Well, actually, they did lose because they lost their hold of first place in the NFC East because the Eagles beat the Washington Redskins. Something happened in that game. That's good. Well, hang on a second. I'll explain that to you in a second. Rock on, Philly. But in any case, yeah, because with Philadelphia winning, they're now a game up on the Cowboys because the Cowboys didn't play. Cowboys play this Sunday, however. They're going to take on the New York Giants. Giants are on a 4-game winning streak. I said it before, I'll say it again. I'm not too sure about this NFC East because nobody really wants to win it. Nobody wants to lose it, but nobody wants to win it. So, in any case, Giants coming off of a good win. Eagles coming off of a great win over the Washington Redskins. Redskins, not too sure where that ship is going right now, but right now, all I can tell you is that who's ever steering it's running it aground. Now, I don't know if that's Shanahan's fault or if that's RG3's fault. Eagles, okay, let's talk about this for a second. This happened Sunday in Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. are not terribly far from each other. You can take a train and get there. train, plane, cart. It's not very far. It's not like going from Dallas to Washington or Dallas to Philly. I mean, that's a haul. You got to take a plane or, take a very long road trip. Going from D.C. up to Philadelphia, not a big deal. I mean, it's not. It's got some distance, but we ain't talking, a day and a half worth of drive. So here's what happened. There was a fan in the stands when the Eagles came out of their tunnel. There's, high-fiving their fans. And there's a fan that's obviously a Redskin fan, and he has a Redskin flag draped over the railing on the side where players can actually reach up and shake hands and high-five you. So what happens? Deshaun Jackson comes over, sees this flag, rips it out of the hands of the fan, wads it up, and throws it in the garbage can because he says, and I quote, "I don't want to see the Washington Redskins colors in my stadium." Well, what the hell do you think that team across the field looks like, you idiot? I mean, the Washington Redskins. And these are fans. They paid money to come in. They paid money to cheer their team. They paid money to, and I hate to say this, Mr. Jackson, but some of that ticket money that visiting fan bought helps pay your way. I mean, I know there's collective bargaining, and I know that there's, TV revenue that you get paid on, but ticket sales still helps pay the freight. And I'm, again, okay, this happened where? In Philadelphia, Dave. Okay. And for that purpose, and for that reason, I have to kind of just shake my head a little bit and say, it's Philadelphia. This is the same area. This is the same team that booed Santa Claus, threw snowballs with batteries in it at Jimmy Johnson when he was the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. This is the same team, by the way, that had Kickergate, Bountygate, because they put a bounty on Zendejas when he was the kicker for the Dallas Cowboys. They wanted to break his leg, and this is Buddy Ryan's day, folks. Let's remember Buddy Ryan has a couple of kids now in the coaching ranks. Rob Ryan's down in New Orleans. So I mean, and the other Ryan's coaching in New York with the Jets. So I mean, part of me is not surprised, but part of me doesn't understand. It's a flag, man. Deal with it. I mean, I hope you weren't like this when you're in college. I mean, I've been to a Texas OU game, and let's face it, that's a hated rivalry. Texas A&M, hated rivalry. But you don't see ball players going to the stands and ripping signs out of people's hands or flags out of people's hands. Okay, yeah, there was an incident once where a Texas A&M player took the towel of a Notre Dame player and ran off the field, and yes, a fight ensued. Okay, so the player he took the towel from was a guy named Tim Brown. I mean, come on. So he had a piece of hardware. What? The Heisman Trophy. Whatever. I'm joking about this. What I'm serious about, though, is that when there's an interaction, I mean, this reminds me of like when the moron, and I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to give him any more airtime than it's worth, because he's still in the league. But in the National Basketball Association, here's a guy that goes into the stands and fights a fan. I've seen it with hockey, where hockey players try to climb over the glass to get to fans. Last time I checked, sport is still entertainment, not interaction. The only interaction a fan should have in sports is to congratulate or to heckle from a distance. Not in the face, and not, you don't get close to the players. But that's, like I said, this happened up in Philadelphia, so why should it surprise me? It shouldn't. Cowboys travel to New York. They take on the Giants Sunday afternoon, and they have their work cut out for them, because once they play New York, then they got to play Oakland back home on Thanksgiving Day. By the way, speaking of Oakland, my old friend, guy I used to do a radio show with here in Dallas, he was the five-time All-Pro center of the Dallas Cowboys. His name was Andre Gerard. Andre's now playing for the black and the silver of the Oakland Raiders, and he was injured for a little bit, missed a couple of games. He played this past Sunday when they went on down to Houston, which is Andre's hometown. Surprisingly, I say surprisingly because I don't know what the hell's going on with the Houston Texans, but the Raiders beat the Texans, and so good on Andre, and I'm still not too sure why in the world you have a 5-time All-Pro center and you have him playing right guard. The guy's, he's got accolades. He's got chops. The man's got skins on the wall. Put him where he belongs. Play him at the position he's good at or great at as a 5-time All-Pro. But in any case, so good on Andre. And he'll be in town on Thanksgiving Day, hopefully, maybe. We might get a chance to cross paths and say hi. We haven't done that in a while. But it would be fun. He's if you've never got an opportunity to see him play, or even for that matter meet him, he's one of those gentle giants. Went to Galena Park North Shore High School down in Houston, and then he went on to Colorado, played for the Buffs, and then he came to the Cowboys to play here. So anyway, and speaking of which, we were talking about, okay, Oakland isn't really using him, so there's a mistake. And speaking of mistakes, how do you like that segue, boys and girls? I was trying to figure out how in the world do I jump the ship to go there. But speaking of mistakes, and we'll talk more about this probably after the break, but we're gonna tease you into going into this thing. But 50 years ago, on November 24th, here's a situation. November 24th, there's a lot of things going on that day in 1963. The first thing that goes on is the fact that the nation is in mourning, and with the loss of President Kennedy. More so than that, Kennedy's body is being moved from the White House to the Capitol to lay in repose in the Rotunda. And we know the stories. And we remember seeing the images of Caroline and John Jr. and Jacqueline going to the casket, and you see Caroline's gloved hand going up underneath the flag to touch the coffin of her father as they kneel in at the Mass. Then here in Dallas, the alleged suspect, a guy named Lee Harvey Oswald, is about to be transferred from the Dallas City Jail to the Dallas County Jail, which, by the way, at the time that at this era, the jail was literally at Houston and Maine. That's where the jail was, which to this day is the Records Building. They converted that to the Dallas County Records Building, but that's where the jail was. And we're talking literally a block or so from where Kennedy was shot and killed. So here's Oswald being transferred, and as that's going on, a guy named Jack Ruby, Jacob Rubenstein, his real name, changed it when he came from Chicago to Dallas because he didn't want to have that ethnicity to it. But anyway, Jack Ruby walks down the ramp of the Dallas Police Department after sending $20 via Western Union just down the block. Brings out his little snub-nosed revolver, lunges forward as Oswald's being escorted down by Lieutenant Lavelle. He's the one that's in the Stetson, the white suit and the Stetson. He's handcuffed to Oswald, puts the gun between his crook of his elbow and his rib cage and fires one bullet. And we know the story behind that. He kills him. So where's this all going, Dave? Well, somewhere in Cleveland, Ohio, there's an NFL football game about to take place. And up until his death, Pete Rozelle said this was the worst idea he ever had. He said the games are played on Sunday. Even though the nation is in mourning, even though there is some semblance of a crisis happening, because there was a swirl of all sorts of conjecture and idea and fear of what happened in Dallas, Texas at 12:30 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963. But Pete Rozelle said the game is played. The game is bigger than the situation, which it was not. Because if you remember in 2001, after 9/11, games were canceled. They didn't play on that Sunday. Now, high school football was played on Friday night. Maybe that was for the better because the kids took their minds off of it, and that was good, and parents as well. But the professional game, that was different. Same with baseball. Baseball took they stopped their games too until, and pardon the pun, the dust settled. But in 1963, Pete Rozelle said, no, we'll play a game. So, what happened in Cleveland, Ohio? In that Horseshoe Stadium, when an upstart team walked through the tunnel. We'll tell you all of that and much more right after this along the North Texas Sports Network. Maybe, maybe not. Football fans, now you have something to wear that shows off your team spirit. It's not a shirt. It's not your average hat. This is a Spirit hat. It's shaped like a star, but it also doubles as a beverage and food tray. The Spirit Star hat is unique that not everyone has one, at least not yet, but they are available online at SpiritStarHat.com. That's SpiritStarHat.com. Order yours today so you can have it by game day, and a portion of every purchase is being donated to the Gridiron Heroes Foundation. So wear something cool, help those that forge this great game of football, and cheer on your favorite team, the Spirit Star Hat.
The 78th annual AT&T Cotton Bowl Classic is just 12 months away. Be sure to get your tickets to this American classic by going to the website of the AT&T Cotton Bowl, www.attcottonbowl.com, and reserve your seats for next year's game. What a great gift idea for the sports fan in your family. Enjoy the atmosphere of college football in one of the premier stadiums in the country, Cowboys Stadium in Arlington. The 78th AT&T Cotton Bowl Classic next January of 2014. Don't miss it. Champion, a word that is used to show the winner of a competition, be it as a team sport or as an individual. Champions are made, not born. Champions stand above the rest. Be a champion to a child that needs the guidance. Mentor a student. A few minutes each day can make the difference in their lives. So volunteer to be a mentor. Change someone's life today. Be their champion. You might just be surprised at how you will win in the end. Mentoring. It's life-changing.
Right back here on the Dave Michaels Sports Show. And just before the break, we were talking about what happened back in 1963 in a stadium in Cleveland, Ohio, where a NFL football game was going to take place, but it wasn't just there. It wasn't just in Cleveland, Ohio. It was all throughout the NFL. Now, remember, the NFL back in those days didn't have 32 teams. And back in those days, you only played 14 games. So here we are, November 4th. In 1963. So the season was almost to an end. And the Cleveland Browns were playing host back. This is what confuses people. The Cleveland Browns, today they're in the AFC. Back in those days, they were in the NFL. There was another league called the AFL. They hadn't made the merge yet. The merge didn't take place for at least another 6 or 7 years. So here we are in 1963, Cleveland. It's cold, wet, rainy, nasty day. And the owner of the Cleveland Browns informed the public address announcer that when you announce this team coming out on the field, you don't make mention of the city. You just refer to them as the Cowboys. Don't say Dallas. The word Dallas at that moment in time became a dirty word. It became synonymous with the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And I got news for you. It's taken a while for us to get that stigma off our back. It probably didn't. It really took place where we were no longer the city of hate, which was what we were labeled for many, many years. Cowboys win the Super Bowl in 71. That helped a little bit, but it was really a TV series called Dallas with Larry Hagman and Patrick Duffy and Linda Gray and Victoria Principal and all those people. That really took the stigma off of Dallas and kind of made us a glamour city. That's okay. That's cool. I don't have a problem with any of that. I'm just making a comment. But Dallas, I'll tell you another funny story with this. In 1964, like the spring of 64, so Kennedy was shot in November of 63, getting into winter. spring of 64, up in Flushing Meadows, New York, in Long Island, Queens, that area. They had a exhibition called the New York World's Fair in 1964. And my family took a road trip up to New York, and we went out to where my grandmother lived out in Riverhead, and we drove back in toward, I mean, this is a long drive, by the way, but went out to Riverhead, Long Island, which is way out on the island, came back into Flushing, and we went to the World's Fair. Now, the World's Fair is just that. It's a World's Fair. So you have these expos of countries, of cuisine, it was the first time I ever saw a microwave and a microwave oven make a hot dog in 30 seconds. That was cool. I was also 5. What did I know? But that being said, here's where it kind of gets a little interesting. We went to the Texas Pavilion, and I giggle because I remember seeing the home movies of this thing. But there was a young lady, blonde, go figure, in full Texas regalia. That means the starched, Western shirt with the fringe on it, right? Kind of the Roy Rogers look, and the white Stetson, the little 10-gallon hat, and the chaps and the jeans, and having a big belt buckle that was done in turquoise. I remember all this like it was yesterday. And she's sitting there, and she gave me a silver bullet. I remember that. She gave me a little silver bullet, a la Lone Ranger. And she asked the family, we're all standing there, and she says, "So where y'all from?" And says it with a Texas drawl. And I put my hands in I do the Superman pose, if you will, and I'm about to say I'm from Dallas, Texas, and all of a sudden a hand goes over my mouth. It was my dad's. And he said, "We're from New York." Because I was going to say Dallas, Texas. I was proud that I was from Dallas. Didn't have anything to do with the Kennedy assassination. That was home. I was happy to be from Texas. I'm a first-generation Texan, so I'm a little proud, right? Also a little stupid. That's okay. What do I know? I was 5 years old. I didn't understand it. But my parents did. And my dad, quickly put the hand over my mouth, and he muffled my mouth, and he said, "Oh, we're from New York," which is where my dad was from originally. So we didn't say it. And there was a stigma when you traveled if you were from Dallas. Now, I will tell you this much. The stigma changed a little bit with the TV series Dallas, because if you traveled and you went to Europe or wherever else the TV show was being shown in syndication, and you said you're from Dallas, well, that stigma was, oh, you have an oil well in your front yard. You have cattle in your backyard. Everybody thought we lived like JR. Hell, even JR didn't live like JR. He had a nice little house in Malibu. He was from Weatherford, Texas, for God's sakes. The son of Mary Martin. Yes, we know. But it took a lot of PR to kind of get that stigma off of what Dallas was. They really did label us as a city of hate. They labeled us as a city that kills presidents. Washington, D.C. never got that in Ford Theater with Abraham Lincoln and John Wilkes Booth. You didn't. People never considered that to be a city of hate. City of idiots, maybe. That's today. That's my little political side note there. But my point being is that you didn't have that stigma in Washington, D.C., but in Dallas, Texas, we did. And people thought that if you lived in Dallas, you carried a rifle, you carried a pistol, you shot everything in sight, and in this particular case, you shot a president. All right. Now, with that said, I have a former classmate of mine who is a former FBI analyst. He's not a special agent. He's an analyst. And if you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and you've been watching, I think it's WFAA, Channel 8, they use this gentleman as an expert. I'm not taking that away from him. He has studied diligently the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Here's where it gets a little By the way, his name is Ferris Rookstool III. All right. That being said, in 1984 through 1986, I worked for the Dallas Police Department. I was a photographic technician, which is a very fancy name for what? A crime scene photographer. I worked in the division that is called, or was called in those days, the Physical Evidence Section. It is now called Crime Scene Investigation. Thank you, Jerry Bruckmeyer. Nonetheless, while I was at work for the Dallas Police Department, we were assigned what was left in physical evidence, what was left behind by the National Archives, the Smithsonian, and the federal government, that was all left here. We investigated the death, the murder of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And in doing so, we were very much involved with trying to find the answers to the questions that everybody had on their mind. And I finally realized, even after leaving the police department and doing my own diligent work, it's never going to be the who. We're never going to be really... I mean, did Oswald fire the gun? Well, yeah, probably. Most likely. From the 6th floor of the school book depository, most likely. But I am of the mindset, and I am of the... I'm an intelligent enough man to understand, and after studying the Zapruder film frame by frame by frame... This is Abraham Zapruder, by the way. I am of the mindset, I'm going to just say that, I'm not going to say I'm convinced, but of the mindset that there had to be a second gunman, and the reason I say that is because if you look at the film closely and you break it down frame by frame by... I'm not an idiot, I mean, but people discount this. People think that I'm, way out in left field somewhere. If you look at that footage, and it gives us the timing, it tells us, how many seconds it took for those wounds to occur. We know it took 5.6 seconds. And as people have stated that were witnesses at the scene, that there were 3 shots. They heard 3 bullets. They heard 3 shots. Police officers heard it. Witnesses heard it. We understand that. So, okay, we're going to live with the 3 shots. There's a guy down at the triple underpass by the name of Teague that was nicked underneath the chin by a fragment of concrete that was apparently a ricochet from a bullet. It's not counted for. We don't know where it is. We don't see fragments, but it happened. The guy took stitches for it. We know the bullet that passed through Kennedy's neck, throat, into Conley's underneath his right shoulder blade, coming out underneath his right breast, going into his right wrist, coming out the back end of the wrist, and lodges into his left thigh. It's 7 wounds. And if you're buying into that magic bullet theory, which we know that it wasn't magic, it didn't zigzag through the air, because, even after closely analyzing the way the limo was set up, it was more of a direct line. But here's where I think there's another gunman. If you look at the Zapruder film, you'll see Jacqueline Kennedy, as President Kennedy's hands are up around his throat, his elbows are flared out. He's wearing a back brace. He can't move. He's trussed up like a Thanksgiving turkey. He's not moving. That back brace kept him in place. And for so many years, there have been analysts that said that's because of the back brace that he probably did get hit in the head because he couldn't move. That meaning he couldn't duck down. He could lay down, but he couldn't duck down. So what happens? You see Jacqueline Kennedy's white glove on his left forearm up around the wrist, going up toward the wrist, as his head turns toward her and giving Jacqueline Kennedy a quizzical look, as it is reported in the Warren Commission. Her face is up against his, millimeters away from each other. The fatal shot comes to the head. If it came from the 6th floor, that's one hell of a lucky shot, because it didn't get Jacqueline. Hence the reason why I believe The second gunman was where everybody else says he was, on the grassy knoll, shooting back in toward the frontal lobe and hitting the forehead, making his head snap back. And what is the famous line from Oliver Stone? Back and to the left. Do I believe in the Oliver Stone movie, by the way? No. It does raise some questions, though. I mean, there's some poignancy to it, but I don't believe it. I think a lot of it's fabricated. I think he took a lot of poetic liberties on it. So I'm not a huge fan of. I have the movie and I've watched it. I think for what it's worth on celluloid, it was, I saw a lot of my friends in the movie. A lot of friends were extras, so that was cool. In fact, a young man, I say young, a young man that's a member of the Texas Radio Hall of Fame, which they had their induction ceremony this past weekend, I ran into. His name is Jim White. I keep looking for his name in the credits as the newsman that you see at Dealey Plaza. He's a radio personality that worked at KRLD here locally as he's now a foodie. He does the restaurant reviews, but he's also a radio DJ. He worked as a morning jock at 92.5 FM, KFM. I think they just changed the call letters at that time to KNRG and then later KZPS. There's your history about Dallas radio that you really don't care. One of the guys that actually was at the scene in the Dallas Police Department during all that chaos was a guy named Bill Mercer. And Bill is a gentleman who, for many, many years, sports guy from Muskogee, Oklahoma, originally comes to Dallas and works for the great blowtorch of KRLD 1080. And he works in television. But he finds his niche, this is Bill Mercer, mind you, finds his niche as a wrestling play-by-play guy for World Class Championship Wrestling, which was also the Von Erich family promotion. And we're talking about Papa Fritz and, of course, David, Kevin, Kerry, Michael, Chris, all those guys. So, and I think his claim to fame, he says at one time he was the fourth most popular person in Israel. I looked at him and said, funny you don't look Jewish. But anyway. But he was at the Dallas Police Department. He was at the headquarters during all that ruckus back in 1963. And he had he tells a story about how a policeman was going to pull his plug from his tape recorder and his microphone. And he said, you do that and I'll hit you in the head with this microphone. And by the way, I have a microphone that's similar to one he had. And he saw it and he says, yeah, that would probably survive more than his head. So, and I don't doubt it because I've beaten that microphone up many times. But there's some great stories. There's some great backstories. I talked to a guy, he's unfortunately passed away. His name was Ben Laurie. Ben Laurie was part of the KLIF crew, news group. No, I'm sorry, he was with WFAA at the time, news radio. And of course Bill Mercer. And there's a ton of people here locally that were very much a part of what happened on that fateful day in 1963, including Dan Rather, by the way, who was at the time the CBS reporter for the South. And he was traveling with the Kennedy trip into San Antonio and then up to Fort Worth and then to Dallas. And so he was ramrodding that. And it's kind of interesting that CBS, by the way, which had Walter Cronkite doing the marathon, if you will, they didn't ask Dan Rather to be a part of it. In fact, they flat out kind of denied it. So where did he take his chops? NBC. Go figure. We could actually do, if I wanted to, we could actually do an entire show. We eliminate the sports talk which we pretty much have done today. But we can eliminate all of the talk and talk about the Kennedy assassination for hours and hours and hours on end. And you might learn something. And then again, you might not. Who knows? Here's a little piece of trivia that nobody really cares about. Abraham Zapruder and Jack Ruby, they had something in common. Their faith. They were both Jewish. But it was kind of interesting to know that Abraham Zapruder, in one aspect, in one form of light, if you will, didn't want to be the hero, but is the hero, so to speak, because of the film that he shot, and it kind of gave us a time frame, and it kind of gave us an eyewitness to what happened. And then here's Jack Ruby, who thought he was a hero, and was nothing more than a murderer who gunned down the alleged assassin of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He also, by the way, Oswald was also charged with the murder of a Dallas police officer by the name of J.D. Tippit. Recently, the city of Dallas put a placard up, and I say recently, this was within the last year or so, to commemorate or to at least have acknowledged of the place where J.D. Tippit was gunned down on that fateful day of November 22nd, 1963, and by the alleged gunman Lee Oswald. For those who are not aware of the way it words out, and you say, well, you keep using the word alleged. Why? Well, because he was never brought to trial, so he could never be the convicted murderer. He was just the alleged murderer. There was no trial. Where Jack Ruby was the murderer of Lee Harvey Oswald. There is so much history going on with what happened on that fateful day in 1963. Television changed forever. When I was in TV production at Skyline High School, I really delved into the birth of television. We had the Golden Age, which was all the entertainment shows and, Sid Caesar's shows and the Milton Berle Texaco showcase and things. I can go on and on. I Love Lucy and all that. But on that Friday, November 22nd, 1963, television became a birth. Because at that very moment, we found the power of television and what it can do for us. And the events that went beyond. I mean, we didn't obviously have video cameras. We didn't have mini cams. We didn't have any of this type of technology. We had 16 millimeter movies that had to be rushed to processed and then thrown on. I mean, so here, I'll give you a prime example. In 1981, President Reagan, his life was attempted by John Hinckley. And there were a lot of cameras there. And news went immediately on the air. And we had images and we had information immediately. And when I say immediately, within a matter of minutes. At 1 o'clock Eastern, actually around 1:30 Eastern, 12:30 our time, that's when the shots rang out. So at 12:42-ish, what was on TV at the time, if you're watching CBS, there's a soap opera being on. And it's interrupted by a placard. It just says CBS News Bulletin. And you hear the voice of Walter Cronkite. Then they go live with imagery just a short time after that, like around, 10 minutes. But when word came out that President Kennedy's death was now official, the official time of his death, by the way, was 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. 38 minutes later is when it got to the networks that President Kennedy was dead. However, it really was before that, unofficially, by a guy named Eddie Barker, who worked for the television affiliate, the CBS affiliate. In those days, those call letters were KRLD. It later became KDFW, and now they're a Fox affiliate today. But in those days, Channel 4 was the CBS affiliate, KRLD. Eddie Barker was the anchor, and he actually made the announcement on network television because the CBS people in New York piped him through. And he said that he got word from a source, a reliable source at Parkland Hospital, that the president had expired long before the 38-minute mark at 12:38 our time. I'm sorry, 1:38 our time, 2:38 Eastern time, which is when Walter Cronkite actually made that formal announcement by the White House saying that President Kennedy had passed away. So, but by today's standards, we would have known about that almost, boom, instantly. And, war's in our front, is in our living room every night. It was during the Vietnam era especially, but, that was a day late with some of that film being brought across the ocean. Now it's beamed by satellite. Technology's a wonderful thing sometimes, and sometimes it's an overkill. The Boston bombing recently, it happened in April, is a prime example. because up until they got actual information, there was all this speculation of who was behind the bombing, why the bombing. They didn't have any information. They were just, they're spitting things out, so they're entertaining you. Well, that's not what news is about. News is about fact. And unless you have the facts, unless you know the facts, unless you are convinced of the facts, don't say anything. And they're into the lesson of journalism 101. But in any case, so we went off on a way tangent here because the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy is this Friday. It's kind of interesting that the 22nd day of November in 1963 and in 2013 both happen to fall on a Friday. Kind of interesting. And I saw something yesterday of interest as well, is the fact that the internal flame that's at Arlington National Cemetery was something that Jacqueline Kennedy wanted, and because it was asked of a Sunday, obviously no hardware stores were open, so they had to improvise, and the gentlemen that were involved, the lieutenant colonel and the colonel that were involved at Arlington, had to put together a kind of a temporary situation until a permanent one could be put, and then I understand not too long ago they had to redo that. So in any case, President Kennedy, some people didn't like him. To this day, there's some people that think that he wasn't a great president. I don't know what you put your stamp on greatness in an administration, but I will tell you that if we didn't go to war and we didn't get annihilated by the nuclear bombs that were placed 90 miles south of Miami, I don't know what else you can define the presidency about. He went to Berlin, gave a great speech, went to the American University in May at a commencement exercise, and asked, what kind of a peace do I mean and what kind of a peace do I want? Well, not a Pax Americana. But he also said the words that in the final analysis, we all share this basic common link. We all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We are concerned for our children's future, and we're all mortal. Powerful words. And words that I hope still resonate somewhere, and that nobody takes that extra step, because it'll be a fatal one, and it'll be it won't. Nothing's good going to come of it. Kind of grateful that cooler heads prevailed in that particular instance. We got to put this one in the history book. Thanks for indulging me. I know it's supposed to be sports, but sometimes history gets in the way. And kind of glad that on this particular day that everything turned out okay. In the meanwhile, we'll do it all again on next Tuesday. By the way, this Thursday night, normally the Lone Star Grill would have been our home for Silver Flash and Blue Thunder. Not anymore, so we're finding a new location, and as soon as we do, we'll let you know. So keep it posted on the DaveRadioProductions.com, which is our website, or find us on Facebook at Facebook.com, Dave Radio, DAVRADIO, or find us on Twitter at North Tex Sports, and we will let you know where we are, what we're going to be doing, and how we're going to be doing it, and all that fun stuff. So in the meanwhile, you guys have a great day. Thanks for joining us on the Dave Michaels Sports Show. We'll put it in history books, and we'll do it all next week. So long, everybody.